is a big bucket list item for many people. And let's be honest, if you're coming from Canada or the United States or Europe, it's a really far flight. So you want to make sure that for your first trip to Japan, everything goes smoothly. Now, obviously, with travel being travel, there will always be some little annoyances, but if you follow these tips, that will give you a head start on a really amazing trip. So I just put this introduction together like 50 times, but apparently I can't talk, so I have to re-record constantly. But anyway, I just got back from my first solo trip to Japan a couple weeks ago, and it was absolutely amazing. Actually, it was remarkable, and I wanted to put together this video to help you out if you're planning on going to Japan in the near future. I know that fall and spring are a great time to go to Japan, and a lot of people have asked me for help, so here are just some simple tips to prepare you a little bit more for that wonderful bucket list trip to Japan because it is truly spectacular and I recommend it for everybody. My first piece of advice is to fly into Haneda Airport because Haneda is just so much closer to Tokyo Center. After a 13-14 hour flight, you really don't want to have to then trek for over an hour to get to your accommodation. So, really, for a lot of people, Haneda is a wonderful option if you can fly directly there. Now, as far as public transportation goes in Tokyo and the other major cities such as Kyoto and Osaka, you'll want to have a transportation card on your phone because it does make it a million times easier than fiddling with the machines. I'm not sure how to pronounce this, so I apologize if I'm getting the name wrong. I'm really sorry. But I used a Suica card, I think is how you say it. Feel free to correct me in the comments. But it has an adorable penguin on the front. And what's great about this is you can just top up the amount of money like a debit card. And if you have an iPhone, you could also take money off your credit card to top it up. If you get a physical card, you are going to need cash in order to top up. So it does make it a million times easier if you have an iPhone. Now, if you have an Android, just go with the physical card. I did read somewhere that they are going to be available. I know for a time they weren't, so just double check ahead of time. But having that IC card makes a world of difference if you're running around on the metro or trying to catch the train. But just keep in mind, even though this card covers metros, buses, some of the local commuter trains, it does not cover the bullet train. That is going to be an extra ticket. I absolutely loved using public transportation in Japan. Even if you're not used to taking it in your home country, it's really easy here. A lot of the directions are written in Japanese and in English, so the language barrier actually wasn't much of a problem for me. And you could also eat bento boxes on the fast train, which I love, but just don't eat from bento boxes on the regular commuting train because it's not a thing. But on the fast train, enjoy them. So, regarding the bullet trains, you can certainly use the JR pass to get around. I know that I said that the IC card does not include the price of bullet trains, and that's true. In the past, the JR pass was a really, really good deal. The price has gone up significantly since October 2023. So, my advice is to check out one of the calculators online and put your itinerary through it and see if it makes financial sense to do the JR pass. If not, the point to point tickets are great. The machines are super easy to use. The staff will help you if you need any help. And they don't really sell out either, these tickets. The only exceptions would be New Year's week and Golden Week or any other major holiday. So just like make sure you're checking the holidays in advance. If there are no holidays going on, you could just rock up to the train station and buy tickets the day of. You should probably be fine. When it comes to packing and traveling in between cities, a lot of travelers did take advantage of luggage forwarding services. You can simply pop that in search and a bunch of suggestions will come up. Basically, the luggage forwarding service will ship out your bags a day before you travel and then will usually show up a day after you arrive. So you always want to have a little day pack to take with you. And the reason that people opt to do this is because there isn't a ton of overhead space on the bullet trains. So, for as families traveling together, for example, it does make a lot of sense to take advantage of those luggage forwarding services so you're not struggling with tons of big bags in the train stations. You're not interested in forwarding your luggage using a luggage service, something else that you can do is reserve space on the fast train for your luggage. However, keep in mind the bullet trains, they're a lot like airplanes. So that means that your carry-on bag can go in this like the overhead space above you, but if you have a gigantic suitcase, there may not be anywhere for it to go. So just make sure you're reserving that space in advance because it does book out and you don't want to be stuck in a situation where you bought your ticket and you're ready to go and there's nowhere to put your bags because because honestly, I don't know what you do. So just avoid it entirely and reserve the space if you think you're going to need some extra room for your suitcase. Now, let's talk about something that surprised me as a first time traveler to Japan. I had read that trash cans were kind of not a thing here, but I didn't quite believe it until I was actually on the ground. So, something fantastic about Japan is that vending machines are everywhere, so it's really easy to stay hydrated, which is especially important in the summer when it's super, super hot and humid. But you are going to have to carry your trash with you. So, make sure that you have a day bag that has space in it for your garbage because you're going to be carrying it with you for quite a while. Now, if you stop at a 7-Eleven or another convenience store, personally, I suggest eating your treats inside the store if they have an area for you to sit in and then throw away your trash there because sometimes it can be quite a while until you find another trash can. On a similar note, you don't want to eat and walk in Japan or drink and walk in Japan. It's considered rude to just be strutting down the street, eating a big snack, and bumping into people. So you do have to, when you get an ice cream or other street food, sort of stand to the side and finish it before you can continue sightseeing. So don't make that mistake. People will think you're rude if you do it. When it comes to finding restaurants, Google Maps is really good as far as reviews go, especially from other travelers. But at the same time, Google Maps is actually really terrible with opening and closing times. I can't tell you the amount of times that I've looked up whether or not a restaurant was open and Google Maps said that it was, but then it turned out to be closed. So there are other resources available, such as Table Log, which I've heard a lot of travelers really enjoy. So yeah, Google Maps, you can use it, but don't rely on it. As far as making reservations in advance, if you have your heart set on certain high end restaurants, you definitely want to make a reservation in advance because a lot of the fancy, tiny sushi bars only take reservations. But when it comes to just like picking a restaurant out off the street, you may have to wait in line, but you don't necessarily need to make a reservation ahead of time. As a first time traveler in Japan, I also highly recommend that you go to the Tuna Auction. If you're somebody who loves sushi and loves Japanese cuisine, it's a really unique cultural experience, and you can explore the market right afterwards and eat a lot of super fresh sushi. So, that is something I do definitely recommend first time travelers to Japan do if they are really into the food scene. Now, as a first time traveler to Japan, you're probably wondering where you ought to go and visit. And I'm not going to be too creative and go outside the mold here. I really do think you need to see Tokyo, Kyoto, and Osaka at minimum. If you have time in your itinerary, definitely make room for Hiroshima as well, because I do think the history there is incredibly important. And even though some of you are probably thinking, well, gee, Rachel, that's boring. You're really not getting us off the beaten path at all. Truthfully, there's something to be said about staying on the beaten path for your first time visiting Japan. In all of these cities, the tourist infrastructure is great. And even if nobody speaks English to the extent that they do in your home country, you can still communicate very readily, and people are used to tourists. And there's also a ton to see and do in all of these cities, so you'll never feel bored. I know personally I could have easily spent 2 weeks in Tokyo and would not have run out of things to do. So, again, at minimum, check out Tokyo, Kyoto, and Osaka. And if you have time to fit in Hiroshima, definitely do because it was one of my favorite cities in all of Japan, and I do think it's worth visiting. Now, obviously, I'm not saying to never leave the big cities. However, there are a lot of really awesome day trips that you can do right from Tokyo and right from Osaka to get out in nature for a little bit. And if you have the time to build those trips in, they really are awesome and they will add a little bit of diversity to your travels in Japan. My two favorite day trips from Tokyo include Kamakura, which is a gorgeous seaside town. You can see the giant Buddha, you could see views of the beach and bamboo forests. Another favorite for me is Nikko, which can be visited in about 2 hours from Tokyo. However, because it takes 2 hours to get out there, I highly recommend including Nikko as an overnight trip or even a weekend. And I'm going to make a separate video all about Nikko because I loved it so much. If you're doing a day trip from Osaka or Kyoto, I highly recommend going to Nara. The deer are absolute gems and are so stinking cute when you feed them. I love them. But you can also see a wide variety of temples there. And I found that Nara was not as crowded as Kyoto. And it does make a really cool side trip to take from either of those two cities. It's really super easy to get to. I did the day trip from Osaka and I just took the local commuter train and I was there within an hour. So it was perfect. Next, I want to talk about safety as a first time traveler to Japan. Japan is very, very safe. Your odds of becoming a victim of a violent crime are incredibly low, like incredibly, incredibly low. It is so super safe. One of the safest places I've ever been in my life, seriously. Something though that you do need to do before traveling to Japan is buying travel insurance, especially medical travel insurance, because I know a lot of credit cards will cover trip interruption and trip cancellations, but the medical is not included. So do make sure that you have a medical plan in place before going to Japan because you don't want to have to pay an absolute fortune if you get sick over there. These things do happen, and it's a lot better to be safe than sorry. With that being said, it's also super safe to explore Japan at night. I went to Japan as a solo female traveler and I had no problem going around the big cities such as Tokyo at any time of day or night. Keep in mind that the trains do not run 24 hours, but if you're out after the last train, which stops around midnight, seriously don't worry about it. You can easily get a taxi back to your accommodation. You could stay out in karaoke if you want or chill at an internet cafe, but you're not going to be stranded or anything. You can obviously get a cab to go back. Furthermore, there are a lot of really cool activities at night, such as in Osaka, Team Lab has a botanical garden that's really fun to check out. Safety thing I will say about big cities because we all are adults here and it does need to be brought up. The red light districts, particularly in Tokyo and Osaka, you may want to be a little cautious. Not that they're super dangerous or anything, but first and foremost, don't take pictures of any of the girls. They do get really upset and you could get yourself into a lot of trouble. And then, secondly, if you are walking through one of these districts and someone tries to get you to come into a bar and is being really aggressive about it, don't do it. Just mind your business and keep to yourself. Like, honestly, even if they are a little sketchy, these areas, they are still kind of interesting to walk through and fun. But just, mind your business. Don't take pictures. Don't get into it with anyone. And if you don't bother anybody, they won't bother you. So, really, just use common sense and you'll be perfectly fine there. Speaking of minding your business, the Japanese are really helpful if you need help, but if everything's fine, they will politely ignore you. And a lot of the times, the Japanese aren't super confident with their English speaking skills, so it may feel a little isolating if you're coming from an area such as the Midwest in the US, where everybody is super friendly and outgoing. It might be a bit of a culture shock, but just know it has nothing to do with you. People here tend to keep to themselves a little bit more, and that's perfectly okay, but it's just something that you need to know so you're not surprised by it. As a first time traveler to Japan, you'll definitely want to go shopping. I grew up on Pokemon, and one of my first stops was the Pokemon Center. And I also desperately wanted to go to Don Quixote because I heard so many amazing things about it and ran out with like 50 million beauty products. However, when you do go shopping in some of the smaller cities or if you go shopping at the temples, a lot of places do not take credit card. So you need to make sure that you always have cash on you when it comes to getting cash out of the ATM machines, not all ATM machines will accept foreign debit cards. So, really, your safest bet for getting money out is to go to 7-Eleven or to go to the convenience store. I didn't have a single problem when it came to getting money out of those machines. And I always made sure that I had some cash on me because this extended to some of the family owned restaurants as well. And the markets and the street food, they really don't take credit card as much as they do in the US. So just be mindful and always carry cash on you. Guys, so I think that'll about do it for me. I hope these tips for your first trip in Japan really do help you. And if there's anything I missed or if you have any more specific questions, feel free to drop those down in the comments. I will get back to you. And the way I want to wrap up this video really is don't stress too much about your first trip to Japan. It really is a safe country and super easy to navigate. I've traveled solo all around Canada, the US, and Europe, and personally, I didn't think Japan was that much more difficult, to be honest with you. And believe me, when you come back from your first trip to Japan, you'll be planning your second trip to Japan because it really is that amazing. I absolutely fell in love with it, and I'm counting down the days when I can go again. So take care, enjoy Japan, and if you need anything, feel free to reach out. And don't forget to subscribe because it really does help me too, which you want to do because I'm pretty cool. So take care and happy travels. Bye bye, guys. See you in the next one.